So erotic.
That's weirdly sexual.
Yeah.
I'm sure Duncan's not going to isolate that and listen to it over and over again.
Yeah, with brown chicken, brown music.
Brown chicken, brown cow.
Good job, Duncan. That was a long chapter.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's exciting there.
Okay, confession, I haven't actually read Dance with Dragons since it came out, so that was. But this chapter is pretty cool. I mean, I'd forgotten how Dany's plotline is so kind of dull and monotonous through a lot of Dance that and then this chapter ends with literally the most exciting thing that could ever happen, right?
Yeah.
And that's I remember being kind of taken aback, oh wait, something's happening,
I think we should all continue to have this conversation in our characters' voices. I think that would be fun. I just want to hear Zach talk like Strong Boas.
Daddy Chopper's back.
So there's this really great essay series on the Meereen storyline in A Dance with Dragons. It's called The Meereen's Blot, and it sort of talks a lot about the political situation in the city, but it also has some interesting things to say about Dany's character arc in the book. So I just wanted to give a quick summary of that. So the essay argues basically that central to Dany's conflict within herself is this idea that she's torn between these two personalities, the mother figure and the dragon figure. And the mother figure is nurturing and empathetic. She feels a sense of kinship with the weak and the vulnerable, especially women and children, and she wants to protect these people and empower them. And on the other side is the dragon, and the dragon side is full of fury and capable of immense violence and destruction. It's important to remember, though, that in the first 3 books at least, the source of the dragon's wrath is the mother figure, because the love she feels for the weak and the abused transforms into this murderous rage against the strong and the abusers. That is to say, the mother figure is able to sort of justify the cruelty of the dragon and frames it as this sort of self-righteous act in Dany's mind. A good example of that is at the end of Book 3 when she's looking at all of the crucified nobles and trying to convince herself that she did it, quote-unquote, for the children, which is a line that we hear a few characters use. So that is the mindset that Dany is in when she comes to Meereen. She sees herself as a liberator of the weak and a conqueror of the wicked. She means to bring a harsh justice to Slavers Bay. And Dany's disgust of slavery stems very much from this sense that she was once in the role of a slave, being owned and traded and abused by her older brother. Another motivating factor is the fact that Dany lost her child at the end of the first book and can never naturally conceive, and so the essay sort of poses the idea that she sort of displaced a lot of that trauma into sort of emotionally adopting the slaves that she rescued. Therefore, after capturing Meereen, she cannot give them up, she cannot abandon them, as a mother cannot abandon her children. What changes this extremist mindset, however, is at the beginning of Book 5, when she is presented with the dead infant Hazia. Up until this point, Dany is still very much in dragon mode. She's dealing with the Harpies killing off her men. She's sending out shave paids to track down suspects and torture them for information. But the baby was not killed by a Harpy, it was killed by a dragon. And Dany is forced to confront her own complicity in the suffering of others. It's sort of a reminder of the horrors that Dany herself is capable of. So Dany's desire to make peace is therefore very much driven by this newfound doubt about her own nature. She begins to fear that she is no better than the Khals who sacked Lazar, or the dragon who devoured Hazia. And as the essay suggests, it's sort of entwined with guilt over accidentally killing her own child by trusting Mirri Maz Duur. And basically that's why she works so hard to bring about peace in Meereen, not only to save the city from more bloodshed, but also to restrain herself from the bloodlust that she feels within her, a bloodlust that she knows came to corrupt so many of her ancestors. And there's a nice quote at the end, towards the end of the essay, which is basically outlining the fact that for peace, Dany has chained her dragons, restrained her impulse towards violent revenge, agreed to marry a man she doesn't love, agreed to abandon a man she does love, agreed to share power with people she detests, agreed to allow slavery outside Meereen's walls, agreed to indulge in various cultural practices she dislikes. and given up her best chance at Westeros, her body, and potentially her own happiness, and toughest of all, agreed to let thousands of Astapori starve outside her gates. She wasn't perfect and did flirt with abandoning and risking the peace at times, but her overall course of action here is an impressive and astonishing series of self-sacrifices and self-submissions, all for her people.
So who poisoned the locusts?
Oh, they're not poisoned. That's my theory, is that they're not poisoned.
It's too much honey.
Oh.
Well, I was thinking, like, strong, but in order to kill someone, you'd want to, like, actually use poison that would be quite virulent. Virulent's probably not a word, but strong poison. And the fact that he ate an entire bowl of them and only got stomach sick, which means that, like, a regular person would have to eat at least half of them, and I just, it doesn't make sense. I just think he had a bad reaction.
Strong Bellas we're talking about here.
I know, but just still, the first time I read it, I was like, okay, it's Hisdar. It's got to be Hisdar. He mentions the locust. He tells her to try to eat it. But then after reading the Meereen's Blot article, that had me thinking it wasn't Hisdar, but I'm not completely on board with, who he thinks did it. But it would be funny if, like, they weren't actually poisoned and he just got sick. He ate a whole bowl of locusts. He blamed Resnak, right?
Really?
No, Skahaz. I get him mixed up. The shave bait. Yeah.
I'm going for the Green Grace, man. She's too helpful.
I think she's probably the Harpy, but I don't think that she would have poisoned her because she worked so hard to get that piece, and this is just ruining it.
Yeah, I think that I'm kind of with the Meereen's Blot that I don't think it makes sense for any people in the Sons of the Harpy camp, which I agree. I think the Green Grace is a part of that why would they want to poison Dany here? Because she's doing everything they've wanted at this point. So it makes more sense that someone would want to disrupt the peace, which fits with Skahaz.
Well, Barristan blames Hisdar, like that's the basis on which he plans his coup. Like I think they track down the confectioner of the locusts, and he says that Hisdar made him poison it. But the thing is, the shave pate was the one to ring out that confession. And the Meereen's Blot guy theorizes that it was probably shave pate that poisoned him, because the nobles don't really have a motivation for poisoning the locusts. Like they've actually got everything they wanted out of Dany. They've achieved peace. They've got the concessions they wanted. And if they did want to kill her, this is like the least logical way to do it, because Hisdar is completely implicated in the murder because he gave her the locusts. So it almost like seems like Hisdar is the patsy rather than the culprit.
Yeah, I agree. I think at the least, he's a red herring from George. I think we're meant to suspect so much about Hisdar that I don't think he's actually behind this one.
And it's interesting, the political sort of dynastic struggles that are going on in Meereen before Dany arrives. Like, it seems like Hisdar's house and Skahaz's house are at odds with each other. Like, the Lux are really noble, the Kandaks are sort of like a middle-range house. And the Kandaks saw this as a way to up their political status, so they threw in their lot with Dany. So the fact that the Lorax get back in with her and form a marriage alliances, and he gets sort of pushed out of court by Hisdar and replaced with someone. So he sort of has the most to gain by shattering that peace, I guess, because it'll turn Dany against the nobles again, and she might bring him back into her sort of good graces and all that.
Of all the characters in Meereen, I actually think the Shave Pate's the most interesting.
I like him, yeah. He's one of the characters from this whole, all these characters that were just introduced to in this book that always kind of sticks with me. Because he basically made a decision when Dany took over that I'm with her for better or for worse. He cut his hair, he's created this whole, paramilitary group, and he's throwing in his lot with her. So I hope he didn't poison her, but I just like him.
You keep calling him Resnak.
I know, because they're the same person in my head. It's Resnak Mokandak, so it doesn't matter.
They're so not.
No, it's because they're always mentioned together, that they've blended. I know they're two people, but I always have to say them in my head before I identify which is which, but I know who they are.
Who's the Shave Pate? Skahaz?
Yes, Skahaz, no Kandak, yeah.
He's the head of the Brazen Beasts, who are like the city guard or the gold cloaks of Meereen.
Speaking of Resnak, though, do you guys think that the whole thing about Quaithy's thing with, like, beware the perfumed seneschal is him or someone else?
Well, it's either him or Varys, right? Like, those are the two that it could be.
Yeah, those are the two main ones, but there's actually, like, an interesting theory that the ship that Tyrion and Penny are on is called the Silisori Cohorin, and I guess they like, in the book, they're trying to figure out what that translates to, and they get to, like, the Fragrant Steward, which vaguely could mean perfumed seneschal, right? But I think that's a red herring, I would think, because the ship sinks, right? So how would it be something that Dany would have to worry about?
Unless Tyrion kills Dany.
That's true. That's true.
It just seemed like it's too specific to be wrong. Like she said, perfume seneschal. That's a very, and she said like your assistant or your aide or advisor. But perfume seneschal is, and he's referred to as the perfume seneschal several times.
Yeah, but I think he's too obvious. So I'm kind of in the varies. Like I think that'd be an interesting one to make it, especially since he doesn't seem to be supporting Dany in the books, obviously.
What does seneschal mean exactly?
It's like a steward, right? It's like the keeper of your castle type person.
A helper.
Financial guy. I'll look it up right now.
That's like everything,
That's who Kay is, right? In King Arthur's court, he's the seneschal.
Yeah, it's just a steward. Major domo.
That's a really dumb word. I don't like it.
Major domo?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, like, in terms of, like, it being interesting or not, I'm kind of with you guys that just as a whole, I do not find these chapters interesting. I find them quite boring as reading, and I think that while I like the Meereen's Blot essay, all it's really doing is just trying to make something that's not compelling when you read it more compelling by, just tying it together. And I think that there's a point to be made that maybe part of it wasn't, like, just, like, George, like, fucking up. It was him actually trying to do this thing where he's showing, the aspect of war and peace with peace and governance and how difficult that is. And I think that I get that, but like I say, I just think that ultimately it's still just putting a good shine on what is, just not compelling material to read.
Yeah, I think that was the experiment he tried to do with FeastDance. He wanted to show like the nitty gritty of actually ruling. So you've got Dany and Jon and Cersei, and it goes into a lot of detail and all the little problems and power mechanics and balancing act that you have to do. And I like that in concept. It just could have been, done better. A lot of these characters in Meereen aren't that interesting. Maybe if they had been more engaging, it would have been better. Maybe it had been better edited or more condensed. Because, I'm sort of like you, Mikhail. I don't think I've reread any of the Dany chapters since I read the book back in 2011. So, and even back then, I had a very loose grasp on what was actually happening in the politics of Meereen, and I didn't really care that much to sort of figure it out because I wasn't that invested in the Meereenese, so it's difficult to enjoy. But I think this chapter is really cool, and the first chapter is pretty good. They're this sort of, I guess, the framework, and it's all those middle chapters that probably could have been chopped down into a much smaller sort of bunch.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I think it could have worked shorter. I think that it definitely could have worked, but I guess that is the whole thing, right? That he couldn't resolve it in terms of timelines properly, so he felt the need to pad it out, right?
Yeah,
that's what happened.
Which is funny because the book is enormous.
Just think what it was before then.
Yeah.
But would people have been happy with just him like ignoring that and kind of having maybe like Tyrion show up way earlier than it would seem to make sense in Dany's chronology? Because people complain about that all the time with the show, right? Like people get around too fast, and I guess would that be a problem in the book if that's how it had worked?
No, because people move really really fast in the because the first book's like George was he was just a whip smart enough writer, and like that writing is not padded at all, and so Caitlin, she darts around the frickin' Riverlands in the south in a matter of like one chapter.
Yeah, shoots down to like Storm's End and stuff really fast. That's true, and like they go to King's Landing really fast. Yeah, I don't know why he felt the need.
You don't need 2 chapters of Tyrion on the frickin' Valyrian road in the palanquin with what's his nuts. I mean, I know the road is interesting, and we want to look at the cracked cement and the dry grass and the nothingness for 2 chapters. No, you don't need to do it.
Personally, What's His Nuts is one of my favorite characters from the book, so I don't appreciate you denigrating What's His Nuts.
I'm really upset that he wasn't included in the show.
Yeah. Fan favorite. I like how visceral the language of the chapter is. It does a good job of aligning you with the sense of disgust and claustrophobia that Dany feels. She's very much a stranger in a strange land, and what sort of sucks is how the Fighting Pits almost makes a mockery of everything that Dany's been trying to achieve in the past 8 or so chapters. She's sacrificed everything for peace, and then to bring her into this slaughterhouse and just sort of rub her face in it, it's really harsh. What's also interesting is that all throughout the chapter, Dany affects this sort of air of moral superiority, but as soon as Drogon arrives and starts devouring people, suddenly it's the Meereenese who get to feel all disgusted and horrified. Once again, I think it's that cultural disconnect, and it's in that moment that Dany's sympathies are reversed. She can only think about protecting Drogon. If Dany has 2 children, the slaves and the dragons, she chooses the dragon. She chooses that part of herself, I think.
Something that did stick out to me, though, is, and I feel like George does this kind of thing, doesn't he, where they have that fake fight where everyone ends up dying, but it's between fake Dothraki and fake knights, and it looks at first like the Dothraki are going to win, but then the Knights win. I'm scrolling through and I can't find it. But
yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
do you guys think that's any kind of like, you know?
Well, I was trying to make connections with
feast.
Yeah, with all of the, there's the boar versus the elephant versus 6 wolves. I'm like, okay, who could the elephant be, and who could the 6 different wolves be? And then I realized I was going to be crazy if I tried to do this for everybody. But there's probably something there.
I feel like, I mean, I don't think anybody has a doubt that Drogon is the second of her mounts from the prophecy. One to bed, one to dread, one to love. And it just makes, like, it's kind of like a significant echo in the end when she's... Because I do think that her declaration is intentionally erotic. I just don't think George could write that without being like, Just because when she's, first on her wedding night with Drogon... not Drogon. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like both of these are kind of like a consummation of sorts. Like when she's with Drogo in the field, though, the final piece of dialogue in that chapter is just yes when she finally consents. And here, it's yes before, like the heat between her thighs and the dragon is taking off.
That's
yes,
great.
Take me
And then
now.
we do get her bleeding all over the Dothraki Sea after this too. So, I don't know. It does happen.
It's intentionally sexual. It's a consummation of whatever. Dany's milestones.
So.
He's the one to
No,
love. I'm just thinking about it.
That's what I was thinking, right? Because like if it's Drogo and then Drogon and then what comes after that.
As long as it's not Jon Snow, I'm okay with anybody.
Well, that's probably who it's going to be, though.
It's definitely going to be Jon Snow.
Period.
Nah, I don't.
One of the things I like is that Dany is completely convinced that she's already had her 3 treasons, and even that line where she says it she was the first, Jorah was the second, Brown was the plum, and I'm like, no, because she's like, if she thinks it's all wrapped up as in a bow so nice and tidy by this point, and she doesn't know she's got 2 more books to go, but still, I'm not even convinced that I mean, probably the Meiji, she was the first one, but I don't think Jorah was the second, and Brown Ben is... The House of the Dying couldn't care 2 shits about Brown Ben Plum.
So I know we've done this shit like a million times, but what are the 3 things that they say she'll be betrayed for? So it's like gold and love and what's the
blood?
What's the last one? Blood. Okay.
Blood, gold, and love in that order. Yeah. Miss Sandy is the love betrayal.
Yeah, I like that. I really don't want that to happen, but that would have the most emotional impact, I think.
So the blood is that would be Jorah, or that would be the Meiji, Ares Mazdor then. So. Yeah, I don't know what the other.
Why would it be a retroactive prophecy?
What do you mean?
Like
because that prophecy happens after she dies.
Yeah. They're like, you'll be betrayed by 3 people, and Dany's like, oh well, that must have been the one that happened in the last book.
Well, isn't time kind of pointless and free flowing in the House of the Undying anyway? It's not like these are things that are happening in the future. These are things that have happened, may never happen.
Yeah.
Yes, and if the mount is Drogo, then I guess that makes sense. But it is in the future tense. It's like you will know.
You'll realize it. You'll put it all together. End of book 7. Sit down with your chart and your blackboard and show your followers, okay, let's put this all together.
Dany really should be working harder to solve this prophecy. I mean, let's get real. She is just not putting in the work.
Not at all.
She worries about it a lot, though. I mean, there's not really anything she can do other than fret about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like it's a prophecy. You can't do anything about it. No.
Oh no, I'm joking. She's
almost
better.
Like trying to
why isn't she on the forums with us figuring it out?
Yeah. Although I guess some things can be averted because you see in the House of the Undying, Rhaego burning a city. So I guess some futures, some fates aren't fully decided yet.
Yeah, well, the House of the Undying is super weird anyway. But going back to what I was saying, so do you guys think that the Dothraki actually are going to invade Westeros and be defeated by the Knights?
I think if they did invade, they would be defeated. But we know she's not. She doesn't have. I mean, she's going to have the Dothraki to. I think they'll defeat. In the upcoming battle. But I don't think they're going to play a huge part in her return to King's Landing.
So which Cal is it that she encounters at the end of her last chapter? Is it Cal Mago?
Pono, I think. I want to say Pono, but I'm not positive.
I thought it was Jocko.
Jacko, maybe Jacko.
I think that's right. Actually.
Who's Pono?
Called Jocko, I guess, but.
You're just making up names.
I did not make up that name.
Is that
basically? I'm just trying to figure out.
It's
so obviously
Jocko.
Yeah, it's Kyle Jocko.
Yeah.
Pono is the first one that declared after Drogo died, so it's not him.
And that's the one that took Eroa, the girl that Dany saved from Lazar that was being raped. And then, when she awakes from her pregnancy, she finds her like dead and her throat slit, and that's like Arrowy sort of haunts Dany like her whole life.
Yeah. So if this guy's like a mortal enemy, would the plan be for her to like take control of the Khalasar? Is that what you guys think is going to happen?
Yeah, well, like we get so much prophecy like to go forward, you must go back. Like I think she's going to have to return to the Mother of Mountains one day and like force the crones to submit to her and declare like Drogon the stallion that mounts the world and all that. So I don't know, maybe she'll be like the master Khal that'll like unite all the other Khals, like the Dothraki prophecy says.
Well,
I don't know, that just seems too complicated to me.
Yeah.
Well, when you come full circle, we have this, because in the first book we have this, it seems like, the Dothraki are organized, Robert manages to piss off Khal Drogo enough that he's like, yeah, we're going across the ocean to rape and pillage and kill these motherfuckers, and then of course that all comes to nothingness and ash, and then it would be full circle if like finally Dany gets together her Khalasar to take across the ocean. I don't know what good that would do. I don't know what that campaign would be like when winter is coming, but I usually try to see like how things come around in an ironic way.
Yeah.
So do you guys think she's given up on Meereen? Because we sort of see in this chapter her slowly just becoming sort of disgusted by the Meereenese fighting pits, and it's almost like this realization like, I don't belong here. These aren't my people. I'm never going to be able to change their minds or their culture, and they're never going to be able to change my mind. And it's like, and she at the end she says, just before Drogon arrives, she says, I'm going to take off my rabbit ears, and it almost seemed like I'm giving up. I'm giving up on this piece. I'm never going to make this work. I'm never going to be happy. And then suddenly, like a phantom, Drogon appears, like he's almost summoned out of her subconscious or something, and upends everything.
Yeah, I hope so, because if she comes back and has this amazing battle and then sits in Meereen for 6 more chapters, I would lose it as a reader, someone who loves the books. But I can see this going sort of like, in Lord of the Rings, where you had the huge battle of the Pelennor Fields, then you had the War Council, and then they just went right to Mordor. Like, I can see her having some major council, and then just boarding every possible ship, going to Volantis, freeing those thousands of slaves, and then just that's the plan, but she's not going to end up in King's Landing or in Westeros by the end of book 6, I don't think. But I can just see her accelerating that storyline at least, or I hope.
Yeah.
The whole Dothraki thing is such a weird wrench to throw in it, because if she's going to like use them to retake Meereen from the Volantines and stuff, like that's like she has to spend time doing that, right? So is that going to be like the interlude before?
Well, it seems like something that would happen in like the first couple of books where everything was sort of fast paced, but here we have to sort of go over every agonizing step of the journey. So I don't know if
or maybe she'll send the Dothraki to overland to like sack all the free cities and then she'll hook up with them in Pentos, and then they'll go right across, or at least they'll be her shock troops.
Well, I think some of it might also have to do with how many of her choices are kind of made for her in Meereen. Like I'm still super skeptical about the whole Victarion thing, but the horn is there, and it, like I'm saying, like all of Dany's choices might not necessarily be as much her own as they have been for a while now.
Yeah, that horn is kind of the wild card, because it's going to do. We know it's going to do something. We just don't know if it's going to go the way anybody thinks.
Yeah, I want it to be simple, like you're saying, Greg. Like they just win the battle and head over. But it seems like there's so many factors at play. It's not going to be that simple. Like
of course not.
You have Victarion, of course, and his fleet, and then you have like what's it? Makoro? Is that? Yeah.
Yeah, the Red Priest.
The Maester, though. What's his name?
Makoro is his Red Priest.
Marwyn the Mage.
Marwyn, yeah.
Marwyn the Mage. And just all these things like that are going to be I don't know, making the journey more complex. So just I don't know what's going to happen.
But also, I think the final chapter is really interesting because not a lot happens. You kind of read it and it's just her in the desert just having dysentery. But there's some really interesting sort of visions she has, and it almost seems like she comes to a realization about herself and who she is, and how ever since the baby died in the first chapter, she's been sort of snubbing the fire and dragon mentality. She has to sue for peace. She has to restrain that part of her, that fire and blood, violent, conquering side of her, and try and become sympathetic and work with people towards peace. But it's almost like it doesn't work. The peace doesn't make her happy. And then in the final chapter, I'll see if I got the quote. She says, "I am the blood of the dragon," she told the grass aloud. Once, the grass whispered back, until you chained your dragons in the dark. Drogon killed a little girl. Her name... Dany could not recall the child's name. That made her so sad she would have cried if all her tears had not been burned away. I will never have a little girl. I was the mother of dragons. I, the grass said, but you turned against your children. So again, it's this sort of subconscious voice saying, you tried to chain your true nature, your true heritage. You turn your backs on your children. It's now up to you to sort of reclaim that.
Yeah, I kind of, I buy that there's like a huge change that's going to occur with Dany, and she's obviously going to be on the warpath. I think that all is true, and I think that hopefully that'll mean things are going to start moving pretty fast. But I don't think it's going to be like the full-on like Daenerys as the conqueror, fire and blood, kill everybody thing. I think that it's going to be some kind of. I mean, she's not going to be looking for peace, obviously, but I don't think she's going to be like monstrous or anything like that. Just, I think that she'll just be more, ruthless and willing to do what's necessary. I don't think that she's going to be like full on like evil Dany.
No, I hope not. But she'll definitely be cutting corners because she's got her goal and it's set. I mean, she realizes, like you read in that chapter, that she should have done this weeks and months ago. That now it's set, and she's not going to waste time. So hopefully that means George isn't going to waste time. And I mean, yeah, we don't need to have the whole world described to us heading back to Westeros. We know it. We know Volantis, Slaver's Bay. We're going to go the other way and get there.
Yeah, I don't think she'll go evil. I just think she's sort of given up on the idea of planting crops. She's a conqueror. That's what she is.
Sure, yeah.
Which is like great, but then what happens, assuming when you conquer Westeros? Like,
I kind of think you've sort of got Barristan and all that trying to work out something without her, and I think the slave revolt is sort of fermenting. And I think once she defeats the Volantines, that finally might be sort of the death knell of slavery in Slaver's Bay, and the sort of slaves might be able to take over without her and run things without her protection. I'm not sure. That might be the only way sort of she can escape that. The Meereen's not.
I don't think Dany's going to become... I don't think there's going to be anybody in the Iron Throne at the end of the series, because I don't think the Iron Throne is going to exist. Like, what would be the point of this entire journey that's basically just this declaration about the evils of feudalism and monarchy and how awful these people are when they're given even a modicum of power? Like, what would be the point of saying, okay, now here's your new king or queen. They're going to be awesome for maybe 5 years, but not really awesome because they're going to be embezzling left and right. I mean... I don't see this being that kind of circular series where it's like at the end everything is kind of returned to status quo, except somebody we like is on the throne this time.
Yeah, that would feel like a regression. Like it's just back to the Targaryen dynasty all over again. I think Dany's more like her path to Westeros has more to do with the end of the world kind of thing, like the White Walkers and all that.
Yeah, I don't know, but it just feels like that almost even going that way of there will be no king in Westeros anymore feels too neat and feels too like forced by the plot, because we want something different. We want something to change as readers, and I feel like that in universe I just don't buy it, Like I feel like Dany will want the Iron Throne. Maybe something gets in her way that makes her fail, but I think that will be her intention, and she's going to try to make that happen.
Well, I could see like Aegon becoming king, but just becoming a sort of puppet king to sort of like the mercantile class, like the people of the free cities, and having the High Septon as this kind of Holy Roman Empire figure, and I don't know, the sort of the political landscape changing around a bit, and maybe the Dornish becoming its own country, and the North and the Wildlings becoming its own country.
Yeah, maybe Dany will get there and realize how not needed she is, or how much they don't want her, and that will cause her to, I don't know, change her course somehow.
I think the world is just going to stay frozen, and everyone's going to, like the 5 characters who are left alive on the planet are going to be huddling down in their caves, telling each other stories.
I like that. I'll go for that.
Yeah.
As long as it's Stannis, Sam, Arya, Jon, and Davos.
All together at the country.
Yeah.
Arya's so good.
I actually don't have like an endgame theory. I feel like that's... I just have no idea, and I don't want to make any predictions because I'm sure I'll just be wrong.
Well, I reckon his original endgame, when the story was like, when we saw that draft, was that Dany simply rallied her dragons, and defeated the White Walkers, and she was like the conquering hero. But I think the story has become way more complicated since then, so I don't know what he's got planned for us now.
I feel like George has become a lot more jaded since then.
It could be just like an end of the world sort of thing.
Well, George did say something like that when I was in my first Comic-Con, and he was talking about Meat House Man, and he said something about like how the world is fucked and we're all gonna when we bring on a nuclear winter, which is pretty much inevitable at this point. And I was just sitting there going like, well, that's a nice thing to hear.
Well, Meat House Man is such an inspiring story about the the power of humanity and to overcome everything, and zombie sex.
Oh, yeah.
So. Sorry, did zombie sex end that conversation?
It's hard to follow up with.
It's a powerful ending.
Any thoughts on who was behind the Sons of the Harpy? I think the most prominent theory is the Green Grace might be behind it.
Yeah.
I think she's involved, but I don't think it has to be one person. Then it's probably not one person.
Yeah.
I don't think it's one person at all. I think that maybe she's like the Harpy, if that is a person. I don't think it is, and I think she might be maybe a leading like member of it. But I just think it's pretty obvious who it would be. It would be like some section of the Great Masters, working against Dany. I think that it's not really like a super secret thing they're going to reveal. It was like Benjen Stark the whole time. I don't know.
And that was the Song of Ice and Fire.
Boom.
Moving on.
Well, I wonder actually, because since there is no Green Grace in the show, if that like means anything, or if it means it's different, or.
See, that's what I hate. I mean, I love the show, but I hate that we can now like try to quantify or use what is and what is not in the show as actual basis for what's going to happen in the books or what's true in the books. I don't like that. But I can't help but do it.
But I think in this case it's not really relevant because I don't think, like I say, the Sons of the Harpy needs to be pinned on one person for it to be compelling as like a antagonist. So I don't think that it has to be the Green Grace for it to do the same things and ultimately come to the same end that it will in the books. Or maybe it's different. I don't know.
Anything else about Meereen?
On the point about
unborn puppies? How?
Oh yeah, I underlined that. Just unborn puppies on a stick.
That kind of undermines the point I'm about to make, which is that I never really saw the Meereenese as being like simplistically villainous, as mentioned here in the show notes, and also the Meereenese blot thing tries to debunk. I never really saw it that way. I think that it can be easy to read it that way because they're obviously so antagonistic against Dany and never seem willing to relent. But I totally buy that, like, as like real humans just totally being unwilling to relent to a foreign person trying to completely subvert their culture and change it entirely. And I think that, like, like the enemies within, I think that even though it's not obvious, clearly they're nuanced and have motives. We're just not seeing that because that would be a waste of time to get like all these random characters like more nuanced in detail.
Well, you think of like Alexander, like I'm trying to think of like historical, and for once it's not about the Romans, but when Alexander basically conquered like the Persian Empire, he, went and installed himself as in their capital city, took over their palace, and I mean, he died very young, and I feel like if he had lived 20 more years, he definitely would have had people, in Susa and in the capital, the cities that he's taking over, that would try to kill him, and there would be, plots against him, and they'd rise up. But he's the guy who I kind of think of, like, who kind of did what Dany did, just without dragons. But that's just one thought, that it has happened before, but I don't think that the Persians would be evil for trying to get rid of him. It's a different culture. It's an alien culture to us.
Even with the unborn dogs.
Oh yeah, I don't think
puppies.
They eat dogs, but yeah.
I'm just saying, like, how does that work? Like, you have to go to
I don't want to think about it.
It doesn't really seem like street food,
Oh, we're actually still talking about how unborn puppies? Oh, I'm done talking about that. Okay.
I just didn't stop thinking about it.
I also really like the point in the Meereenese blot about how Barristan's totally being played for a fool by Skahaz. I totally buy that. And I think that while he has an epic moment, Kingbreaker and all that, I think that he screwed up. And it's going to come to bite him in the back.
Yeah, there's sort of an irony about the hero breaking the peace and making the war. It's like he thinks he's doing the right thing, and we're all cheering him on to bring down Hisdar, but the fact that Hisdar might just be this innocent patsy who never intended to betray Dany.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have like deep thoughts on it because I haven't, again, like looked into the text of this deeply enough to really make my own theories, but it does strike me that like it would be a very George thing to do for the one guy that Dany seems to be able to trust, just really can't trust at all.
How do you guys think Tyrion is going to be introduced to Dany, given what we know?
This is like the closest we've gotten so far.
Yeah, I actually forgot that she like indirectly saves him from dying in this chapter. I missed that, I guess.
Yeah.
Fuck, George, are you serious? Like,
not quite yet. Just a taste.
And now Dany's nowhere near Meereen.
I just can't think of a way that it wouldn't feel weird and contrived for them to stumble into each other. I mean, he's with the Second Sons.
It's probably going to be in the battle, during the battle, because that's all roads are leading to the battle.
Maybe it'll be in that council at the end there. They'll all meet up.
Yeah, I reckon Tyrion could sort of weasel his way into the Barristan Council. He's part of the leadership of the Second Sons. He'd get a place at the table.
I just can't imagine why Dany would care. Like, what value he would have to her for all of his promises, and I have all this knowledge and connections, and I know all this stuff, I could help you. I can't see her giving a damn. Like, I don't care about you.
He killed Tywin, though, and so that's a big card that he has in his favor.
Well, it's probably the same mistake that Quentyn makes. He thinks that she knows about the Seven Kingdoms, but she knows nothing about the Seven Kingdoms. She's never even been there, so she's not going to care about all those things. She doesn't know anything about the history or her own family.
Well, it's not like he killed, like, you know, he could be like, well, I killed Tywin Lannister, and she's like, oh, did you do that for me? He's like, no, it was sort of an accident. I mean, I was just, like, on my way out of prison, and, you know, whatever.
It just kind of happened.
I could see it happening where she would not be sympathetic to Tyrion Lannister, but some random dwarf that came forward and said, you saved me in the slaver's pit, you know, let me serve you and be your servant and keep me safe. I think Dany, with her bleeding heart, would be like, sure, you are downtrodden and defenseless, come be part of my retinue.
That's true. She definitely has a soft spot for, like, the downtrodden and the vulnerable.
I guess that makes sense, but why would he let her be on, like, the council and, like, direct her choices if he was just some random dude, right? I feel like the Lannister thing will factor in somehow, maybe not at first, but I feel like it's going to eventually come up. And I think that, you know, if we're using Quentyn as a comparison, I think it is important to note the distinction in Dany's character after this event and before. And I think that might even be part of the purpose of Quentyn, is to show that Dany before was unwilling to think about all that Westeros stuff, like you were saying, Duncan, but now she might be more willing to take it seriously with Tyrion.
That's true. Yeah, I could see it going either way. I could see him playing the Lannister card now that she's sort of more focused on returning to Westeros, possibly. But I could also see him, playing the I'm a humble dwarf. You know, this is a meritocracy. Can you raise me up the same way you did Missandei and all the other freedmen you've got in your council? Like, that could play to her sympathies, yeah.
Maybe something with Jorah will factor in, since they're together.
Oh, and Barristan, I guess, knows Tyrion. Maybe he'll...
Oh, God, that's right. He would be, unless Barristan dies.
Yeah. Well, we got Barristan, Victarion, and Tyrion all in one place. That could be interesting. I think
that's what I'm thinking, right?
The Lannisters and the Greyjoys, there's a lot of bad blood between them. They're constantly, like, sacking Lannister, all that. So, yeah.
I'm just thinking that Dany might, like, lose her advisors. You know, Barristan might die. And, I mean, I feel like he's probably going to die at some point. And if the Shave Pate isn't reliable, then, you know, that's gone. And, you know, so she just might find herself kind of on her own. And then, you know, if Tyrion shows up and, like, plays his cards in the right way, it might just be like, I don't care who you are politically savvy enough to be able to help me.
Yeah. I think that might make sense, especially since if we're gonna do like the whole like him doing the perfect things to ingratiate himself, I guess that justifies all the savas he's been playing.
But
like
again,
a metaphor
that's true. Like, but like Dany doesn't want to be played though. Like if he plays Dany, that's bad.
He doesn't need to know.
Yeah, I think I think Tyrion could play Dany, and Dany would just never figure it out until it was too late.
Yeah.
But the Second Sons guys and the Tattered Prince, what's gonna happen? Is he gonna get Pentos? I need to know.
I can't tell if you're being sarcastic or not.
I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit at all.
I don't think it's gonna come up really. Maybe a little bit, but I don't think it's gonna be like they're actually gonna go to Pentos and do anything.
My soul felt weary at the end of that Quentyn chapter when it's like, I need you to give me Pentos if you get me a dragon. I just had this vision of 20 more Quentyn chapters in Pentos with the Tattered Prince and like a second Meereen, except in Pentos this time. Unfortunately, that got shut down really quick.
Like, Quentyn, that just seemed like the most flagrant sort of, it's purely world building. There's just nothing to that character whatsoever. It's just purely, I want to show you Astapor for a couple of chapters. I want to show you a bit of Volantis. Like, there was nothing to that.
Places we've already been.
To that character. And it almost completely undermines the whole badass Dornish speech in Book 4, where he's like, we'll get our vengeance with fire and blood, cut to Quentyn dying and renewing it.
That's what it's supposed to do, I guess, though, right? To show that while Doran has this intention of this big revival, it ultimately comes to nothing, right? His plan failed. I think that's kind of the point,
I guess, but no, we're just back at square one. Like, he made a good point, I guess. Game of Thrones subverts our expectations. We sort of already knew that, but...
Yay!
Not saying I like it. That's what I think he was trying to do.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it seems like the most pointless. Sorry.
Yeah, it did feel like a bit of a withered arm of a chapter thread, at least. Like, Quentyn's chapters just felt very insubstantial, and this is obviously driving at something, but it has nothing to do with this character, really.
I like Quentyn.
I feel bad for him. I mean, he's not a bad dude. He's just whatever. He's super. I mean, he died super quick. What can you say?
True.
He's in the wrong place at the wrong time.
He wanted to do so. I mean, he really didn't have a choice. He's like, I can't go home. I feel like that's what I would do. It's like, man, this is the first time in my life I'm gonna take this huge risk and be super brave and just die screaming almost immediately. Optimism is what you feel right before you die.
I think it's more like the effects of what his storyline, like, I don't think his POV is that important, but I think what he does, like releasing the dragons and maybe what the effects of his death will have regarding Dawn's sort of relationship with Dany, maybe that's the point, but yeah, we probably didn't need so much of it.
Yeah, it's so strange to introduce a POV for that purpose and to use him so sparingly just for that. I think that is absolutely what it is for, and there are going to be a lot of implications for him if he dies, and that's going to have a lot of plot impact. But it just feels weird, right? It just feels weird that so much was committed to that. And these are books about characters, not plot necessarily. So to have him just not be much of a character and to use him just for plot purposes feels very weak.
I am pretty optimistic about the Meereen's storyline going forward, because I feel like there's interesting characters in the city now with Tyrion and Victarion. I mean, Victarion's not that interesting, but like he does crazy shit and people can react to it. But Dany's made this sort of decision, like she's realized something about herself, so she might be a lot more decisive when she returns. So
what did I just say about optimism?
True, yeah.
Does this mean Duncan's gonna die?
I'm gonna die.
Well, speaking of, sort of, not really.
Where's this going?
Wait, what? Who is this going?
No.
Look behind you.
Yeah. I start hearing the Reigns of Castamere.
Well, the question I wanted to ask you guys is, since we are on Vassals of Kingsgrave number 200, by the time we get to Vassals of Kingsgrave number 300, do you think we will either actually have Dance with Dragons? Nope, we have that book already. Have the Winds of Winter, or at least news of it.
It's going to be close. I think it will be 2016. I don't know if it'll be as early as whenever. I don't know when we're going to hit 300, obviously, but I think it'll be next year.
I was saying from the beginning that it's going to be like fall to or Christmas season of 2016. So if that was when the book's coming out, then we would have a release date by the spring. So I think that's reasonable. I don't think we'll have the book yet, though. I
have no idea, yeah.
I've tried to bribe our Random House reps as much as I possibly can to let us know, but he's like, I don't know. I can't tell you. So when they know, we'll know.